Well, Monday morning brings more news on Crogga, which has obviously been an ongoing situation about the drilling in the Isle of Man, finding gas, making a big difference potentially to where we are with our finances. Well, Richard, the CEO, is joining us now. Richard, you've got a nice little PowerPoint which we can play at the same time in the background on this. There's big news, and maybe you'd like to take us through what you're releasing to the public today.
Of course, thank you for inviting me to do so. Well, I think for the last few months, 6 months or so, Crogga's been thinking about sort of growing its business, and it was always said at the time it was incorporated back in 2018 that it was going to have a go at both the renewable sector and the natural gas sector. And then with regard to the gas, we look upon the East Irish Sea as our sort of area of interest, and most of it is in the UK sector. So we are going to make a push to acquire one or two, perhaps even three, other gas assets within the East Irish Sea, and we've just succeeded with our first one. It's an undeveloped gas field. It's actually quite similar to the one in the Isle of Man waters, and it's laying about 12 miles off the coast at Blackpool. And it goes by the name of Ronald's Way, which is somewhat confusing because you'd think it might be in the Isle of Man, but it's not.
Well, when I first read this, I was going, why is it Ronald's Way when it's well over into the UK? It's just one of those historical things, is it?
Just one of those historical things.
Amazing. So what are you doing now? You're giving up on the Isle of Man, you're going to take your business elsewhere because you're not getting anywhere with the Isle of Man government?
No, we're growing the business.
Growing the business.
So, we, as I said to you, we're not going to stop here. We're going to go for a third, fourth, perhaps even fifth asset. Not necessarily strictly in natural gas; they could be in the renewable sector. But we're a lively bunch in Crogga, and we're going to grow the business.
I mean, no one can fail to notice that I think Chris Thomas particularly has been gunning questions in Tynwald about this whole operation, and already they've released it's cost thousands of pounds just trying to get terms and conditions agreed, because obviously it's probably outside their expertise internally, and they've had to go external. This is mounting up. This is a taxpayer's bill so far in the wrong direction.
Well, what can I tell you? The Isle of Man owns a gas field, and I think you know the history, but I can just briefly refresh. This gas field was first discovered by BP now 40 years ago. And BP kept it through the first 20 years and then returned it to the Isle of Man government in the late 1990s. And since that time, it's been with the Isle of Man government to relicense it. And they did so in 2018. And the group that they awarded it to was, as you're very well aware, a local management team led by Dickon Sargent and Julian Cottier. And the license is held by a company called Crogga Limited. And based upon the evaluation that BP made in the 1990s and looking at it through today's commercial eyes, this state asset could be worth over £5 billion. And you'll be aware that a month ago we tabled some answers to a question being asked by one of the MHKs, and the government take, as we refer to it, the tax and royalties to be collected by the Isle of Man Treasury, is something like £2.8 billion.
Yeah, well, looking at your PowerPoint, you're claiming you could become the largest taxpayer on the Isle of Man.
I think so, but it's a state asset. So, Crogga is no more than the chosen contractor, could be another contractor. This thing, as with all gas fields, belongs to the state in question, and this time it's the Isle of Man. So it's a very, very important asset for the Isle of Man, and maybe this is the time for the politicians to sort of realise that this is an opportunity to do something very valuable for the island.
Now, you have tried to alter the terms and conditions. I mean, I'm not exactly aware exactly the ins and outs of this. Maybe you can explain it, but there has been this hold-up. Is this right?
We haven't altered any terms and conditions.
Right.
The only thing we'd like to do is drill the well before we shoot the 3D seismic.
So that is a change then, is it not, to what you agreed?
I don't regard it as such, because it's just reordering a commitment work programme.
You were originally, I thought, going to do a lot of infrastructure on the Isle of Man. Looking at your graphics here, it looks like you're going to send anything that you do find in Manx territorial waters off to Morecambe. Is that right? Or was that
okay, let's so do stepwise. We have to drill the appraisal well to find out if this thing is worth the time of day. We could drill an appraisal well and conclude, yes, there's gas, but it will never be commercial. So there's definitely a sort of a failure branch to a decision tree. If we're lucky and it goes down the other branch and it's commercial, then we've got to think about how best to develop it and how best to take the gas to market. And of course, there's a great big gas processing plant in Barrow in Furness that everybody sees when they go out on the ferry from Heysham. So the obvious logical thing to do would be to lay a pipeline. It's actually to the North Morecambe production facility offshore, 44 kilometres or something like that. And that's by the cheapest, quickest way to get Manx gas to market.
Is that not a change to what you originally said, though?
Well, there's nothing in the licence that says where the gas must be processed. It's just a development scenario.
And you're making it clear that because it's in Manx territorial waters, the VAT and all those sort of issues will go to the Isle of Man exchequer rather than UK. Is that right?
Of course, it's Manx gas. It's produced in Manx waters, and contractually it's sold with the phrase is at the wellhead.
So a cheaper option, maybe not having to build a whole infrastructure here, but obviously I can see where you're going with this. Does that, do you think, make it more likely that this is a better deal for you as well then, cheaper deal as well?
It's a better deal for the Isle of Man. It's a hugely better deal for all of us, Crogga shareholders and the Isle of Man.
You're talking about putting all this money into the Isle of Man. Again, there's 2.81 billion paid to the Treasury of the Isle of Man over the lifetime of the fields. Because let's put that in perspective. How much do you think per year is it likely to benefit the Isle of Man?
Okay, I don't know if you want to put that slide up, but I've given you a slide.
Right.
Could you please put up the one?
Oh, the 1.82 million annually. I see that. Yes.
Crogga is a game changer for the Isle of Man government take. If you could put that one up.
Yeah. And of course, Nobles Hospital annual gross spend is 139 million. So it's very tempting. I can see when you put those sort of things. But do you think that it is, likely? I suppose is the thing. I mean, you're not going to this with your eyes shut. But is this a gamble still at the end of the day?
Let me take you through it.
Yeah.
So please, this is. I just need to do step by step.
Sure.
Okay, so to start with, the Isle of Man government has awarded something they call a production licence to Crogga. And then Crogga, as the contractor, is responsible for paying the costs. So there is no direct cost to the Isle of Man government involved in this. It's the company that pays. And what we have to do first, step one, is to drill a well to allow the gas to flow to surface and see if it flows at a rate that is worthwhile spending a lot of money to build a development. And that's exactly what BP would have done had they continued back in the 1990s. So the only thing I'm doing is it's not a new idea that I woke up with one morning. This is the BP plan had they enacted it in the 90s. And we choose to call this well independence because it would most definitely bring energy security and independence to the Isle of Man. It's very big, but we have to drill the well. That's step one. 32 million, it will be raised privately from institutional investors, but in addition, and as I think you're aware from the last time we spoke, there's an awful lot of Manx residents that would like a share of this. Now, we explained to them that it's entirely possible that they could lose their money. Let's say it's a 50-50, if you want to use the word gamble. However, 50-50 for something as valuable as this is a really good chance of success. And although we haven't yet had the opportunity to put it to the test, and I'll explain in a minute why, we think there are literally thousands of Manx residents that would like to buy shares in Crogga to get this well drilled.
We talked about this last time. Did you go ahead? Sorry, did you go ahead and ask people to put money in? I can't remember. Then you returned it or something.
Now, the wrinkle in all of this, and there is a wrinkle, is that when the Isle of Man government awarded the production license to Crogga in 2018, for reasons best known to itself, it did not also enact the necessary drilling regulations. So if I could just give you an example, it's a bit like owning the Manxman ferry, but if there's no maritime regs available, you can't sail it to Heysham. So Crogga has owned the license. They don't own the reserves, that belongs to the state. We own the license, and we've held it for 6 years, but at no time has it been possible to operate it. We couldn't drill it, and we certainly couldn't produce any hydrocarbons. And the reason is because it doesn't have drilling regulations. So the big thing that the Isle of Man government has to do is enact drilling regulations. And I'll speak more about that in a minute. But if I could just go down this line of reasoning. So we have to drill the well. If the well is successful, we're really onto something. And as I've indicated to you, if our scoping case is about right, and it's what BP came up with, it's again not my number, it's the one that BP had. It's just a number, but it's 660 billion cubic feet of natural gas. That's a big gas field. It would make it the 5th largest in the entire Irish Sea. And if you take that amount of gas, you use today's gas price, and you use the fiscal regime as enacted by the Isle of Man, you end up with a conclusion that it would generate gas sales revenues in excess of £5 billion over the 19-year life of field. And of that, the government take is about 2.81 billion. It's a lot of money. And you come to that on a sort of an annual basis, and it's a sort of 182 million annually. So that's what the state owning a gas field would earn for its treasury.
And we've been down this route before talking about this. You know, you've got your people like the Daphne Canes and people like that who just won't have anything to do with gas, I suppose, because it's not seen as that green. It's I know the EU call it a transitional sort of fuel, but I mean, there's so much sort of feeling against it these days, is there not?
No, absolutely, completely not the case.
Okay.
So
Tell
let
me.
me explain that to you.
Yeah.
So natural gas is an essential critical fuel to the world, including the Isle of Man. It is impossible to conduct the energy transition to net zero without natural gas as one of the fuels in the armoury. So the reason that natural gas is good is because the greenhouse gas emissions are only half of that, of the heavier hydrocarbons. And if you take just the UK market, and I could do it for the other countries too, at the moment, the UK imports 70% of the natural gas that it uses. And by the UK government's own forecast, that will increase to 90%, with importing by far the majority of its gas. And the majority of the imported gas now arrives by ship in the form of liquid natural gas from a long way away, Qatar or Australia or USA. And the UK regulator calculates that the carbon footprint of locally produced pipeline gas is only 1/4 of LNG shipped in from far away. So by far, the least polluting of the greenhouse gases is locally produced pipeline gas.
So if you find some off Mackle, it goes down a pipe all the way back to Morecambe, then joins the network, and then comes back to the Isle of Man as such, would it? And
only 12% of it's required in the Isle of Man, and that would satisfy 100% of the Isle of Man's demand. You have to think of it like an export. If you want a little story, when the Isle of Man was a mining nation, it used very little of the lead and the zinc in the Isle of Man. It was an export earner, a very, very valuable export earner. And I would put it to you that that's probably how people should think of natural gas. We will supply as much gas as the Isle of Man needs. We have committed to do that at a discount to whatever the price is in the UK, so the Isle of Man can have, quote, cheap gas. But still on a volumetric basis, by far the majority of it is for export.
And you're talking about other renewables. Where's this coming? The wind and the solar? Is this further down the track?
No, we're ready. So
on the Isle of Man?
when Crogga was incorporated back in 2018, it was always an ambition to go down the twin tracks of natural gas produced from offshore and to participate in whatever were considered the relevant renewable energy technologies. And we've just incorporated a company to do that we refer to as Crogga Renewable Limited. There are three technologies where I think we can excel. There is biogas itself, produced through anaerobic digestion, and I know that you have a really, really good project up at the north of the island run by Robert Morey. I think that's excellent. If there's room for a second project like that on the Isle of Man, then Crogga would be very interested. But if you look across the water to the UK, you may be surprised by this number. There's 730 biogas plants. And why they're so interesting is it's described as the circular economy, especially for the farmers. So the farmers can grow the crop and or use their waste to fuel the plant. And then in return, they get back an enriched fertilizer. And obviously the fuel that's generated, the biogas, can be used as a fuel, cars or whatever, or to generate electricity, or as a petrochemical feedstock for a green product. So I know a lot about biogas, and I think it's a great business.
Okay, I mean, we've had a long chat here. We could go on for a long, long time, but where's the bottleneck now? I mean, obviously you've still got issues, have you, with the Isle of Man end of things here to get regulations sorted?
The main point, of course, is that the Isle of Man needs to enact drilling regulations.
Any sign of that?
Not that we've seen yet.
Are you confident you can get this sorted?
Yes, of course. This is such a valuable asset for the Isle of Man that it's just everybody's got to get on board with why it's going to be drilled, because the island stands to gain so much from a success.
And let me read these off your thing. 19-year secure supply of natural gas for Manx residents. Crogga will sell to Isle of Man at discount to UK prices and aim always to provide at least 10% discount to the UK wholesale price. This is all stuff which people would love to hear, but at the same time, we're not going to be allowed to have gas boilers in our houses if they're built after next year.
Well, okay, let me just say to you to start with, at home, I live in Kent. I've gone completely electric. I have no gas in my house. So we've got a heat pump, we have solar panels, we've got the battery, and we've got 2 electric cars. So I am absolutely in favour of the electric transition, but it doesn't happen overnight. And if you look at any of the estimates that are being published at the moment, and I know Chris Robertshaw directed you to a very good one from DNV, we're not going to make those deadlines as a human race, never mind as the Isle of Man. So I'm not sure that the deadlines are quite as black and white as perhaps some people might have thought.
Okay, let's end up on the slide showing the sort of time scale here. The pre-drilling was maybe now, right? Then you've got appraisals, you've got development and production, going right into 2029.
Sure. So if the drilling regs are available, we will drill immediately after the well that we're now able to drill in the UK waters. The one that is quite confusing, but it's known as Ronald's Way, even though it's 12 miles offshore Blackpool. So we're going to drill that a year from now. And what we'd like to do is bring the drilling rig directly from that to Isle of Man waters and use it to drill the Independence well. And then we find out if the Isle of Man gas field is good or not good.
Okay, so this first one you're drilling is nothing to the Isle of Man as such. That any money that makes goes into the UK coffers, yes?
For which one?
The first one, the Ronaldsway one.
Except for the fact we're an Isle of Man company.
Yes, okay.
But the taxes, of course, go to the jurisdiction of the field.
And you said they're very similar. So I suppose you might say if you find something there, you're going to be very much more hopeful that the Isle of Man will also produce something.
Well, there's definitely synergy, definitely. So we'd therefore like to drill these appraisal wells a year from now. Then it'd take us a couple of years with the 3D seismic and maybe another appraisal well to reach what is known as the final investment decision. Then the big dollars come in, and it would be something like £400 to £500 million to take it through to first gas. and we're still aiming, if we can keep to this timetable, by 2029. I mean, I have to say it's probably 2030.
Yeah.
But that's the time frame that we could deliver.
Well, obviously, it's a carrot dangling in front of the Treasury Minister, if nothing else. Those sort of numbers are very, very interesting. But we'll see, won't we? You've got to have the mood of Tim all behind you, I guess, to get this sorted.
I think so. Exactly right, Paul.